massing of people, turning people into things, the multiplication of things, ceaseless motion, and a congealed static virile posing. So let's just think in our mind for a second about Metropolis, because there are some people that claim that Metropolis was proto-fascist, because there's the multiplication of things, there's turning people into things, there's the massing of people, there's domination and enslavement taking the forms of pageantry. There are those things in Metropolis, right? We do see those things in Metropolis. But is Metropolis fascist? I don't think so. I think it becomes an interesting question. So I'll tell you another artist who is accused of the fascist aesthetic, which it becomes even more interesting to me. Do you guys know who Robert Mapplethorpe is? He, does anybody watch Will and Grace? I can't believe I'm mentioning that show for a second time in one lecture. Okay, nobody watches that either? Okay, well, there's a Mapplethorpe on their set. That's why I thought maybe I could get, okay. Robert Mapplethorpe was a homosexual photographer working in the 80s, and he got accused of the fascist aesthetic. And what he loved was beautiful, beautiful African American males. And he would take pictures of them naked, but frequently their heads weren't there. It was only their bodies. So all of his oeuvre is some of the most beautiful photographs of masculine bodies, usually I think almost, I don't know that he does so many women, in sort of the fascist aesthetic. That meaning that they're individual, essentially what she's saying is that what's accomplished through all of these technical means is that there's no individuality. That the subject is missing from the work of art. And when we look at Leni Riefenstahl, what we'll see, let's not even deal with Triumph of the Will. I mean, that one's easy. There's Nazis, but let's think about Olympia. Olympia, she looks at something, she's one of the first sports journalists ever, right? She's one of the first people to think about, I'm gonna take film of a sporting event. And her way of thinking about that is to take all the footage of the divers, the male divers, and to montage them together so it looks like one diving sequence. There is no individual diver. Do you see what I'm saying? She preferences the visual effect of perfection, of the body ideal, but without any real individual behind the body ideal. So she constantly wants this perfect body, perfect beauty, nothing wrong with it. In the same way Hitler wants this perfect Germany, nothing wrong with it, no blemishes, right? And this idea of perfection and sheer beauty, in itself we should question. In itself, maybe there's something fascistic about it. It's not individual, right? I don't know. Did you guys look at Ivanka Trump? I think she's had a lot of plastic surgery. She doesn't look like Ivanka Trump to me anymore. The nose job, the plastic face. But what's happening, to me anyway, is she's losing her individuality. In moving herself towards the ideal of what America is holding up as right now, well then, I'm sorry. You cut your nose off, you're less of an individual. Now you have the same nose that doctor gave everybody else. Good for you, I guess. You had your hand up?
No, I was just going to say, so was basically what the author is saying is that, I guess my thought is, I feel like the difference between, Hitler and someone who's, just trying to pursue the aesthetic is that, in my mindset, I feel like Hitler, did it with the intent of, I feel like the intent was more malicious.
Absolutely.
So if someone tries to edit something in a way that they think is aesthetically pleasing without the intent of,
this is my hard time.
Right.
This is my hard time with Leni Riefenstahl,
right.
precisely,
So
is because when you watch, look, I've been showing this for a while, and I always ask my classes the same question. So, let's take a vote. Nazi, not Nazi. Everybody just go, oh, Nazi, it's obvious, she's a Nazi. And then I'll say, is she more of a Nazi or is she more of an artist? Let's look at the whole life. You know what I mean? Let's see who she really is, and where do we really condemn her? Is the condemnation absolute? How do we assess Leni Riefenstahl? Do we strip her of all of her greatness, everything she did with her life? Which, my God, I think she lived to 107. I mean, she was alive forever. You know what I mean? I'm not lying. 90 years old, underwater, scuba diving, filming. This is insane. So, I don't know. I don't know how to reconcile, because obviously Robert Mapplethorpe didn't have any sort of I'm going to kill everybody sort of agenda, and yet his art does seem like it is in line with this type of fascism. As does, if you watch the movie Hero with did you guys ever see that movie Hero? It's old now. It's a Chinese movie.
The Jet Li one?
Yes, Jet Li. Take the fascist aesthetic criteria and apply it to the movie Hero, and you'll see the same ideas. The individual must sacrifice himself for the masses. The individuality is of no importance. What's really important is the masses. Suppress your individuality and elevate the masses. And in fact, if you act out of line, if you act individualistically, maybe that serves a purpose for a while, but only if you're reincorporated back into the mass. Right? This is fascism, and this is the tension between group, individual. Thinking for yourself, following what people are telling you. These are the dynamics that we have set up. Is there any questions on that? I'm sorry you don't have the notes for Susan, but I will get them to you. And then the last one, and I just love this so much because I think that it really does. I thought I opened it. I think it sums up everything. Oh, there we go. And this is from a book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, written by Milan Kundera. And Milan Kundera is, from Czech, so he was primarily in Soviet-occupied territory his entire life, mostly. I think he's still alive. But The Unbearable Lightness of Being was published in their mid-'80s, I believe. And it became very popular. They made a movie about it. It's an okay movie with Daniel Day-Lewis. That's all right. Nothing compared to the book. The book is amazing. The book gives you Nietzsche, and you don't even realize you're learning Nietzsche. It's amazing. I read it before I'd studied Nietzsche, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I reread it, I'm like, oh, Kundera is teaching me Nietzsche in a much easier way, in a much easier way than reading Nietzsche. So I do recommend the book. And in the book, Sabina, this one character, has escaped from the Eastern Bloc, and she's gone to the West, and she's in America, and she's dating a senator. And this scene is, he's writing about Sabina has this reaction because being in the Soviet era, she was constantly forced to be in May Day parades, and they're always doing these parades and marches, and and so she's not so into it. She's very critical of this type of activity. So she's hanging out with her boyfriend, the senator, and then the senator says, there's some children playing on the grass, and the senator gets all emotional and says, oh, look, it's so beautiful, the children are playing on the grass. And this is the writer's response. He says, how did the senator know that children meant happiness? Could he see into their souls? What if the moment they were out of sight, 3 of them jumped the 4th and began beating him up? The senator had only one argument in his favor, his feeling. When the heart speaks, remember Metropolis, heart and mind? When the heart speaks, the mind finds it indecent to object. In the realm of kitsch, the dictatorship of the heart reigns supreme. Stay with me here. The feeling induced by kitsch must be a kind the multitudes can share. Kitsch may not, therefore, depend on an unusual situation. It must derive from the basic images people have engraved in their memories. The ungrateful daughter, the neglected father, children running on the grass, the motherland betrayed, first love. Kitsch causes 2 tears to flow in quick succession. The first tear says, how nice to see children running on the grass. The second tear says, how nice to be moved together with all mankind by children running on the grass. It is the second tier that makes kitsch kitsch. The brotherhood of man on earth will be possible only on the base of kitsch. Does that help clarify it for you a little bit? Because it does for me when I read it. And whenever I read it, I go, that's what kitsch is. And I can relate it almost to my own lived experience. And again, I date myself. But for me, my response to September 11th, my first tier was my individual response. My first tier was my authentic, individual response to what was happening. My second tier was manipulated by the media to conjoin me with all Americans, so all Americans can feel the same thing about this event. And this is what makes kitsch kitsch. When it takes your individual feeling response to a situation and has your individual response become linked with the masses and therefore not individual. Are you with me? Is there questions on that? Or the danger of kitsch? Have I convinced you it's dangerous yet? Yes.
So, how do I word it? So I understand that, like, I think maintaining individualism is like a very key thing, especially in life. But at what point is kitsch like basically the concept that like you're not, like the feelings that you have are like, I guess, just meshed into into the pool of everybody else's feelings and therefore yours is irrelevant? Or is it like, cause like,
it's the lowest common denominator. It's
that,
Taylor Swift. I don't know what else to say. It's the lowest common denominator of culture is kitsch.
Right.
And it's like just enough to kind of keep people bobbing along thinking they're a part of culture, so that when an event happens or when they see something and have an individual feeling, yes, they cry the first tear, but then they link it with everybody else. So they no longer sense their own individuality. They suppress it in order to be, and really where it happens most is in times of war. There's actually, when we go to war, remember what he says first, the dictatorship of the heart. When the heart dictates, the mind finds it indecent to object. This is the second attack on individualism in times of war. So the first attack on individualism in war usually is, shut up, support the war effort, that we don't have time to question this. We all need to fall in lockstep with what the country is doing, right? And then the second dictatorship of kitsch is, now you must grieve and not be critical of what the country is doing. It constantly teaches us in a mess. And what happens is when you're walking by, and you see a newspaper. We had my nephew, her cousin, was a Marine in Fallujah, and at one point, there was a whole helicopter from his platoon that was downed. Like 22 of the people in his platoon that were down. And I'm walking by and I'm looking at the Star Advertiser's face, and all I see is little faces. Little faces. And all I can think is am I gonna see my nephew's face there? When my heart's like that, my mind does not say anything. I'm responding sheerly from that feeling-based place, right? So if they can keep us engaged with our feelings, right? Our feelings that are linked together with other people's feelings, then what effectively happens is you internally shut your critical thinking down. Right? And it's encouraged. I had one teacher who told me that during war, there's sort of a sleep, that people's minds are kind of put to sleep. We're sort of taught not to critically think. I'll give you an example. How many of you, don't be shy, how many of you are horrified or will even watch a YouTube video of ISIS beheading somebody? How many of you just can't even believe that they're standing there and just beheading a journalist or something? Find it incredibly brutal, horrible. Most of you, I would hope so. I would hope you would be raising your hands. But however, that seems to us like sheer brute animal violence or something like that. But why are we not using our brains to critique the dude that's eating Cheetos playing a video game that essentially amounts to bombing a hospital in Kabul? Who's more violent? Who's more violent in that situation? The man that just bombed a hospital? Or a group of men that killed one individually with their own hands, being materially involved with the event? Who's more violent? Hey, we can't even criticize ourselves. We can't even have that discussion, right? I mean, it's not even permitted in America to discuss these things. We are only looking at how horrible these people are behaving, and it's atrocious, and the feeling. And what I'm asking you is, you have to, anytime there's a culture that's getting you to feel and think with your heart instead of your head, disregard it completely and start being very critical. I would make another analogy. Why is it that nobody cares about cows but people care about dogs? Who's more violent? You know, somebody in Asia who's eating a dog or somebody in America who's eating a cow. Why is it different? Use your brains. You know what I mean? Like, no, they're both sentient beings. And yet through culture, we've really rarefied one and we've completely debased the other. Does that make any sense? I mean, it doesn't, like, no, but our hearts tell us it makes sense. You know what I mean? When you're in it, you just listen to your heart. And again, that's where I say you have to think. And Hannah Arendt, who I don't quote here, but maybe we'll talk about her again at some point. You know, she was Heidegger's lover and pupil prior to Hitler, and she was Jewish, so she had to leave, so she left. And even after the war, she still maintained a relationship to Heidegger, even though, I'm sorry, Nazi, but maybe, I don't know. We'll not fight about Heidegger and his associations. But Arendt, after World War II, she goes and she watches the trials of the Nazis, right? She watches them, and she writes this paper that becomes incredibly important, and actually people hated her for it. And it's called The Banality of Evil. You know, she's watching Eichmann, the man that facilitated the trains that, you know, moved all of the people to the concentration camps. Eichmann knew exactly what he was doing. You know, he knew precisely what he was doing. He was the man in charge of the trains. That's what he was in. So he did it. You know, he just did it. He's like, that's my job. I did what I was told. I did what I was told. And she writes this and she goes, you know, the thing you have to understand is Eichmann is just an average person. You want him to be a monster. You want to see him on that stand, and you want to see a monster so that you think that you'll be able to spot a monster in public. But the horrifying fact of Eichmann was he was banal. He was just any other German guy doing what he was told to do. And what his failure was, and what she calls him out about, is his failure to think. Failure to think. You know, simply following orders cannot be an acceptable excuse. It can't. Not in America, not in a free country, not in a democracy. You absolutely, if anybody says, oh, I was just following orders, I have a special, when my people take over, we have a special place, we'll send them all. You know what I mean? Like, and imprison them. No, you can't just follow orders. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. You know, no. In a free society, you have to think. You have to think about what you're ordered to do. And if you don't, if you have a failure to think about it, and you just operate through routine in what you're being told to do, I'm sorry, you're complicit. You're complicit. He's not innocent. It was not. Nobody could think he's innocent, yeah?
Okay.
I mean, just because he was doing, would anybody argue? Anybody like to defend Eichmann? Let's see if we can defend Leni Riefenstahl, shall we? It's a little harder argument, or easier argument. Is there any questions on this? I know it's a lot of different thoughts that I'm sort of bringing together into one, but to me, this lecture and why I prioritize it is it's the culmination of what we've learned up till now. And once we leave Hitler, we're going to go to Hollywood. So this is it. This is the sum of sort of pre-Hollywood European cinema that we're looking at. So understanding the individualism and the collectivism and fascism and how the different aesthetics line up is totally key. You definitely, please understand about that. Yes, you had your hand up, Josephine.
Yeah, fascism is the kitsch and all of that.
Yes.
So fascism is like Hitler, Nazi Germany. No?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's fascism. So the totalitarianism and fascism, we can consider them one and the same. You know what I mean? I don't want to parse words. It's anytime you see Assad in Syria right now, he's a fascist dictator. I mean, he's bombing his own people with sarin gas as we speak. You know what I mean? Like, this is fascism. You know what I mean? Like, any time there's a singular person who's deciding he has dominion over the people and he's going to decide how he's going to arrange it, it's fascism. North Korea is fascism. I mean, it's still happening. It's not happening.
So Riefenstahl, she did fascism too? Or?
Leni Riefenstahl?
Yeah.
Well, this is what's interesting is because she's an artist. She's not a politician. So she was an actress, and then she was making films, and Hitler just thought she was so pretty in the movies she was making and thought, wouldn't it be fun to have Leni make a film for him? And so he gave her everything. She's the only woman, really, if we think about it in this kind of way. This is the irony of Leni Riefenstahl and Hitler and everything. Is the most famous female director, the only female with Final Cut, the only female with all the money in the world given to her ever to make a movie, is a Nazi. You know what I mean? It's just amazing, right? Like, since that point, we still have not had another female movie maker have that much at her disposal, you know? Have that much power and control over her own project. And she's an artist. So how much do you condemn her? And we'll watch very carefully. During the worst times during what was happening in Germany, it's very clear she was editing. She wasn't paying any attention. I mean, in a certain way, her narrative holds true. But there's some problems when she actually did visit the concentration camps and get some gypsies to use as extras in a film. Sucks. Sucks when there's actual historical details that, no, sorry, Leni, you did go there. You did see what the camps were like. In fact, you used the gypsies as extras in your film and then had them put back in the camp. I don't know. Then you could say maybe she didn't see what was happening at the camp. I don't know. But she won't even admit that. She won't admit that she was friends with Goebbels and Hitler. She won't admit it. And yet there's diaries with Goebbels going, dinner with Leni tonight. What a great time. Da da da. She's like, no, he hated me. Who's telling the truth? Yeah.
Sontag also mentions in her article about Riefenstahl lying about the film she was in.
Yeah.
Tell me again, because I'm not quite up. I haven't looked at the actual article in a while.
Yeah, it's been a week for me. She just talks about Riefenstahl being in these movies and talking about like a skiing one, and it's not.
It's not even doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to say because she was an actress in a lot of movies, and like maybe, you know what I mean? Like what existed and what didn't exist, we don't know. We've lost most of the film from the 1920s and 30s. Let's not lie. Film disintegrates. It catches fire. There's all sorts of ways. Like the people who are preserving old films are doing God's work. You know, I mean, it is absolutely crucial that we start saving our film. And there's not a lot of funding to do it. You know what I mean? Like unless there's some sort of historical reason to save an old movie, they're just kind of falling apart at this point. So maybe I don't know. I mean, that's the problem with Leni. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think she's clearly a liar. You know what I mean? Clearly she's lying about some of these things. We have facts, and then she lies. And then, at the same time, is it lying or is it are you... Let me put it this way. There's one scene I'll hopefully have time to show you where they ask her about Susan Sontag in her article. I love it. They go, what do you think about Susan Sontag? And she goes, Susan Sontag? She goes, for what a stupid thing for a smart woman to say. Something like that, right? Like it's just like she laughs it off. Like, what an idiot to say something like that. Can't you clearly see I'm just an artist trying to make beautiful pictures? What's wrong with this? Like she cannot grasp that her art being made political against her will is her fault. She will not accept that. She says, no, I was making beautiful film, period. You know, and they exploited it and they used it for their ends. How's that my fault? Hey, it's not a horrible argument. Let's pretend you were that guy who made the Obama Hope or Change. Who's the artist? He's famous. Somebody knows his name. You know exactly what image I'm talking about. What? Banksy didn't do it. No, it's an affiliate of Banksy's though. I'll look it up when we're doing I'll Google it when I don't let you use your phone and I'm showing the movie. But yeah, you know the image I'm talking about, the blue one, whatever. Well, let's just pretend if Obama had turned into a fascist leader. You know, what if he had been a radical Muslim and had done all these terrible things? Would that artist be responsible? And that's kind of Leni's argument. You know, like, I just produced a work of art. Like, how can I be responsible for how the people who paid me to produce the work of art used that work of art? How can I? Yes?
So is her work still propaganda? Because, like, if you said it was used politically, but any propaganda, like, by, like, art histories, not have their own thoughts, so it's not just that.
Well,
why were people thinking that her work was art?
Because she only made Triumph of the Will. That's the only Nazi movie that she made, right? And it wasn't, it was early. She even herself, she said, yeah, I supported Hitler back then. Everybody did. I mean, we didn't, You know, why wouldn't I? Of course I've made this movie. And then she made a movie about the Olympics, and then she goes on and she takes photographs of the Nuba, and you know what I mean? So it's never like it wasn't like she was just turning out propaganda. She made one movie. And then Hitler commissioned her to do the Olympic one, but that had nothing to do with anything. It was athletics. So again, the question is, did she have a political project in mind? No, I don't think so. I think really she was just trying to create beautiful images. But Susan Sontag is saying it's not good enough. It's not good enough because even in the creation of beautiful images, you're doing something political. And what she's saying is she's erasing their individuality. And watch in Triumph of the Will. Watch the montage of the Nazis. And there's this moment where they go like, "Where are you from?" "Hamburg," you know, "Munich." And it's like they're saying where they're from, but it's put together in a way where actually none of them are individuals. You know, the point is that they all come from somewhere, but they're all there together, and their individuality does not matter. They're there now, all in Nazi uniforms. That's the point. So, you ready to watch some Riefenstahl? Thank you, daughter.